That one room changed Veronica's life forever. She was just a waitress delivering a drink to room 3. But Ji Junho, Seoul's most dangerous mafia boss, heard what the gang inside had planned for her. What he did that night changed everything. Veronica didn't know it yet, but her old life was over. The thumping bass of the club was a physical force, a pulse that vibrated up through the worn-out soles of Veronica's shoes. Eden was a palace of glitter and sin, and she was just a servant in its shadows. At 25, her life was a cycle of long shifts and lonely nights, her dream of owning a quiet art cafe feeling more like a childish fantasy with each passing day. Her only armor against the leering patrons was a cheap black uniform and a resolve hardened by necessity. Tonight, that resolve was being tested. A group called the Jade Tigers had taken her rejection as a personal insult. She could feel their hostile stares from across the room, a cold promise of retaliation. Veronica, room 3. Now, don't keep them waiting. Her manager shoved a heavy tray of expensive whiskey into her hands. Room 3. Their room. A knot of pew ice tightened in her stomach. But the rent was due. She had no choice. Unseen by her, from a secluded mezzanine, a man watched the entire scene. Ji Junho. Dressed in a suit that cost more than a car, he was a statue of calm authority. His sharp, handsome face was unreadable, but his dark, intelligent eyes missed nothing. He was there to unwind, but his world was one of constant threats. He'd just overheard 2 men laughing, their words slicing through the noise. Once she walks in, she's ours. The camera is ready. He saw Veronica then. Not just a waitress, but a lamb being led to the slaughter. He saw the subtle tremble in her hands as she steadied the tray, the way her throat moved as she swallowed her fare. Veronica reached the ominous door marked 3. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She took a deep breath, her hand reaching for the handle. Before she could touch it, a strong, unyielding hand closed around her forearm. She gasped, her head snapping up to meet the most chillingly intense gaze she had ever seen. "You're in the wrong place." Ji Junho's voice was low, a command that brooked no argument. He didn't look at her, his focus ahead as he pulled her, not toward room 3, but toward a different, more opulent door-marked penthouse. "What? No, my order is for," she stammered, her feet stumbling. He ignored her, his presence an impenetrable force. He pushed the heavy door open and pulled her into a world of profound silence and luxury. The door clicked shut, muting the club's chaos. The room was vast, all dark leather and gleaming surfaces, with a panoramic view of the Seoul skyline. A dragon's lay. He released her arm. She stumbled back, the tray crashing onto a glass table. She was trapped, alone with him. Was he her savior or a more dangerous predator? He turned fully, his eyes scanning her, dissecting her face. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. Then another, until he was so close she could smell the clean, dangerous scent of sandalwood on his skin. Her back hit the door. There was nowhere to run. He raised a hand. She flinched, squeezing her eyes shut, bracing for impact. But his fingers, surprisingly gentle, brushed a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Then he leaned in. His lips, soft yet firm, pressed against her cheekbone. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through her entire system, a confusing mix of terror and something else, something terrifyingly close to thrill. Her eyes flew open, wide with shock. He pulled back, his expression a mask of cool control. "They were waiting in that room with a syringe and a camera," he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Consider your debt to them paid." Veronica's blood ran cold. A syringe, a camera. The horrifying reality of her narrow escape crashed down on her. But as she stared into the impenetrable eyes of the man who now owned the space between her and freedom, one terrifying question eclipsed all others. He had just saved her from a monster. So why did she feel like she had just been thrown to a wolf? The silence in the penthouse was a living thing, thick and heavy. Veronica's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of her own fear. The ghost of his kiss, a brand of fire and ice, still burned on her cheek. A syringe, she whispered, the words cracking. Her mind conjured the image, sharp and horrifying. The dark room, the leering faces, the helpless plunge into oblivion. A tremor racked her body, and she wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly small and exposed in the vast, opulent room. Ji-Yu Junho watched her, his gaze analytical, as if studying the reactions of a fascinating new specimen. He didn't offer comfort. Instead, he walked to a polished cabinet and poured a single measure of amber liquid into a crystal glass. The quiet clink of the decanter was deafening. The jade tigers are small-time, vicious, but stupid. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving her. Their pride is more fragile than glass. You shattered it. His words were not an accusation, but a simple, cold statement of fact. In his world, this was cause and effect. So I should have, what? Let them? The question burst from her, fueled by a surge of defiant anger that momentarily overshadowed her fear. Is that what you think? A flicker of something, amusement, crossed his impassive features. It was gone in an instant. No, but your no has consequences. You just lack the power to face them. He set his glass down with a definitive click. Until now. Veronica shook her head, backing away until her shoulders pressed against the cool wood of the door. I don't want this. I don't want any of this. I just want to go home. Home? Junho gave a low, humorless chuckle. Do you think they won't be waiting for you there? Do you think a simple apology will satisfy them now that their plan has been thwarted? He took a step closer, and the air seemed to thin. You walked into my protection. In their eyes, that makes you mine. And anything that belongs to me, they will now target with twice the fury. The logic was brutal, inescapable. He hadn't just saved her, he had painted a target on her back, with his own name written beneath it. She was a pawn in a game she didn't know how to play. What are you saying? She breathed, dread coiling in her stomach. I am saying your old life is over. The moment I pulled you through that door, it ended. He stopped an arm's length away, his presence overwhelming. You have two choices. You can walk out that door now, and face whatever the Jade Tigers have planned for you. I will not stop you. He let the grim possibility hang in the air, a death sentence wrapped in silence. Or, Veronica prompted, her voice barely a whisper. Or, he said, his dark eyes holding hers captive, you accept my protection. Fully, completely. You work for me. You live where I tell you. You disappear from your old life, and in return, I ensure no one, not the Jade Tigers, not anyone, will ever touch you again. It wasn't an offer. It was an ultimatum wrapped in silk and steel. A gilded cage, far more beautiful than the one she had just escaped, but a cage nonetheless. Before she could form a response, a sharp knock echoed through the room. Junho's head turned slightly, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. Enter. The door opened to reveal a tall, grim-faced man in a sharp suit, his head bodyguard, Kim. Sir, the men from room 3 are getting restless. They are asking about the girl. Junho's eyes slid back to Veronica, a silent, intense question burning within them. The choice was hers, but the consequences of either path were a terrifying unknown. She had to decide now, face the wolves she knew, or bind herself to the dragon who held the key to her survival. The air crackled with the weight of the ultimatum. Veronica's gaze darted from Ji-Yu Junho's impassive face to the grim-faced bodyguard at the door. The wolves were at the gate, and the dragon was waiting for her answer. Her heart screamed for the familiar, however dangerous. But her mind, cold and logical, knew the truth. Walking out meant a syringe in a dark alley. Staying was a leap into an abyss. I'll stay, she whispered, the words tasting like ash and strange liberation. Junho gave a single, Kate nod, as if her decision was a foregone conclusion. He turned to his bodyguard. Kim, handle the trash in room 3. Make it clear. She is under my protection. If they so much as look in her direction again, they will lose the eyes to see with. Understood, boss. Kim's eyes flickered to Veronica for a nanosecond, registering her new status, before he melted back into the hallway, closing the door silently. Alone again, Junho turned his full attention back to her. From this moment, Veronica, you no longer exist. Your apartment, your job, your friends, they are alive for a ghost. He picked up a sleek, black phone from the table and pressed a button. The car. Now. Panic, fresh and sharp, lanced through her. My things. I have photos. My mother's necklace. They are gone, he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Sentimentality is a luxury you can no longer afford. It is a chain your enemies will pull. He strode to the door, holding it open. We are leaving. The corridor outside was empty. The music from the club was a distant, muffled throb. He led her not back through the pulsating heart of Eden, but down a silent, private hallway she never knew existed, towards an elevator with mirrored walls. She caught a glimpse of their reflection, a king and a pale, terrified scarecrow in a cheap black dress. The elevator descended to a subterranean garage where a black, armored sedan idled, its engine a quiet purr. Kim held the rear door open. Junho guided her inside with a hand on the small of her back, a gesture that was neither gentle nor rough, but one of absolute possession. The door thudded shut, sealing them in a tomb of leather and silence. They drove through the neon-soaked veins of Seoul, but the city looked alien to her now. She was seeing it from behind a glass wall, separated from the life she knew. She watched the ordinary people living their ordinary lives, and a profound grief hollowed her out. He didn't speak. He simply watched the city pass, his profile a sharp, unreadable cut against the window. The car eventually slid through imposing, wrought iron gates and climbed a winding, private road shrouded in manicured trees. At the crest of the hill stood a modern fortress of glass and steel, all sharp angles and impenetrable windows, overlooking the city like a watchful raptor. The car stopped. Kim opened her door. Junho was already walking towards the entrance. "Welcome to your new home," he said without looking back. She was led inside by a stern, silent housekeeper. The interior was breathtaking, a study in minimalist luxury, all cool marble, rich woods, and priceless modern art. It was sterile, soulless, a museum, not a home. She was shown to a room that was larger than her entire apartment. A closet held a collection of elegant, simple clothing in her exact size. Everything had been anticipated, arranged. The level of control was terrifying. Hours later, bathed and dressed in the unfamiliar softness of silk pajamas, she stood on the balcony, the city lights twinkling far below. The door to her room opened silently. Junho entered, having changed into dark, tailored lounge wear. He held 2 glasses of wine. "A peace offering," he said, his voice softer now, the hard edges sanded down by the late hour. He handed her a glass. Their fingers brushed. Another electric jolt. She took a nervous sip, the rich wine bursting on her tongue. "Why?" The question finally broke free. "Why me? You could have had anyone." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I have spent my life surrounded by sharks. Veronica, I know every trick, every lie, every greedy glint in their eyes." He finally turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, his weariness was stark, almost vulnerable. "You have the eyes of a rabbit, caught in the headlights. There is no deception in them, only survival. In my world, that is a rarity more valuable than any gem." His confession hung in the air, more intimate than the kiss, more binding than any contract. He wasn't keeping her just for protection or possession. He was keeping her for the light he saw in her, a light he desperately needed in his world of endless shadows. But as his words settled over her, a chilling realization dawned. He hadn't saved her to be his guest, or even his prisoner. He had saved her to be his sanctuary. And she knew, with a sinking certainty, that a man like Ji-Yu Junho would bind down the entire world to protect his only source of light. The first light of dawn painted the Seoul skyline in hues of rose and gold, but inside the glass fortress, Veronica felt only a deep, chilling cold. The silk of her pajamas felt like a costume. The breathtaking view from her balcony was nothing more than the boundaries of a new, larger prison. Junho had left her with his haunting confession and the half-finished glass of wine. The silence that followed his exit was louder than any club music. sanctuary, the word echoed in her mind. She was not a guest, not her employee. She was a human talisman, a thing to be kept and protected for the solace she provided a ruthless man. The stern housekeeper, Mrs. Cho, arrived precisely at 7 a.m. with a breakfast tray. Mr. Gu has business to attend to. You are to remain in your quarters today. Is there anything you require? Her tone was impeccably polite, yet it carried the finality of a steel door sliding shut. I'd like my phone, Veronica ventured, clutching at a thread of her old life. That is not possible, Mrs. Cho replied without hesitation. For your safety. She placed the tray down and left as silently as she came. The day stretched before her, an empty, terrifying canvas. She explored her room, finding every luxury and no comfort. The books on the shelf were new, their spines unbroken. The art on the walls was cold and abstract. It was a showroom designed by someone who understood price, but not personality. Driven by a restless anxiety, she tried the door. It was unlocked. A small, surprising mercy. She slipped out into the cool, quiet hallway. The house was a maze of minimalist beauty, every surface gleaming, every object placed with precision. It felt like no one truly lived here. It was a machine for existing. She found a library, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view. Drawn to the outside world, she stepped onto a sprawling terrace. The air was fresh, clean. For a moment, she closed her eyes and pretended she was free. Lost, little rabbit. The voice, smooth as velvet and just as dangerous, came from behind her. She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Ji Junho stood there, leaning against the doorframe. He had changed into a perfectly fitted black suit, his hair still damp from a shower. He looked every inch the ruthless king in his castle. He held up her small, worn leather wallet. Mrs. Cho found this in your uniform pocket. I took the liberty of looking. Her breath hitched. Her last connection to her identity was in his hands. You have a photograph in here, he continued, his voice deceptively soft. He extracted a faded picture. It was of her, at maybe 10 years old, sitting on her mother's lap, both of them laughing. Your mother. She passed when you were 13. A car accident. He stated it as a fact, something he had already verified. You have no other family. You are alone. Taze pricked at her eyes, a mixture of grief and violation. How dare you? I dare, he said, his eyes hardening, because I must know everything about what is mine. To protect it. He took a step closer, tapping the photograph. This is a vulnerability. This memory, this love, it can be used against you. It is a weapon your enemies will forge if they learn of it. He held the picture over a sleek, modern fire pit built into the terrace floor. With a flick of his wrist, a small, blue flame ignited from the burner. No, she cried out, lurching forward. He didn't look at her, his gaze fixed on the photograph as the edges began to curl and blacken. Your past is a ghost, Veronica. It is time to let it go. She watched, helpless, as her mother's smiling face was consumed by the fire, turning to ash. It felt like he was burning a piece of her soul. It was a brutal, calculated lesson. He wasn't just removing her from her old life, he was systematically erasing it. He let the last fragment fall into the pit, then extinguished the flame. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. The pain will fade. What remains will be stronger. He turned to leave, but paused, delivering his final, devastating blow. By the way, I've spoken to your landlord. Your apartment has been cleared, and your job at the club, consider it handled. He walked away, leaving her standing on the terrace, the scent of ash in the air. He had just burned the last picture of her mother to cinders, and as the smoke dissipated, Veronica understood the true cost of his protection, her entire history, erased with a single, merciless flame. The scent of burnt memory hung in the air long after Junho had left. Veronica stood frozen on the terrace, the cold marble seeping through the thin silk of her pajamas. The emptiness inside her was no longer just fear, it was a raw, grieving void. He hadn't just taken her freedom, he had scorched her past. For 3 days, she moved through the pristine rooms like a ghost. She ate the exquisite meals Mrs. Cho provided. She bathed. She slept. But she was numb. The dragon had shown his true nature. He didn't want a sanctuary. He wanted a blank slate. On the fourth evening, he summoned her for dinner. The table was set for two in the cavernous dining room, a single orchid as its centerpiece. He sat at the head, watching her as she entered. "You are quiet," he observed, his voice echoing in the vast space. "What would you like me to say?" Her voice was flat, devoid of its earlier fire. "Thank you for burning the last picture of my mother. It was necessary." He took a sip of wine. "Sentiment is a chain." "Then what is this?" She gestured around the opulent room, her voice gaining a sharp, brittle edge. "If you're stripping away everything soft, everything that makes me, then what are you protecting? A shell? A doll you can dress in silk?" He set his glass down, the crystal clicking sharply against the wood. A flicker of something, anger or perhaps frustration, crossed his face. "I am protecting a life. You're curating a possession." The words burst from her, the numbness cracking to reveal the white-hot anger beneath. "You want a rabbit with no memory of the field, so it won't try to run. But I'm not a rabbit, Ji-Yu Junho. I'm a person. And you can burn all the pictures, but you can't burn her out of me." She stood up, her chair scraping loudly. The defiance was a dangerous gamble, but the grief had forged a new strength in her. She would not be erased. To her shock, he did not stop her. He simply watched her, his dark eyes unreadable, as she turned and walked away, her heart hammering a frantic, terrified rhythm against her ribs. Later that night, a soft knock came at her door. It was Mrs. Cho, holding a small, flat box. "From Mr. Ji-Yu," she said, her stern expression unreadable. Veronica took the box with trembling hands. Was this another lesson? A punishment? She opened it. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was not a weapon or a threat. It was a charcoal drawing, expertly rendered on thick, high-quality paper. It was the photograph. Her mother's face, her own childhood smile, captured in stunning, painstaking detail. Every line, every shadow, was an act of profound remembrance. Tears she had been holding back for days finally fell, hot and silent. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a small, handwritten note, the script bold and decisive. "A chain cannot be broken if it is held only in the heart. Keep it there." He had not returned her photograph. He had given her back her memory, remade by his own command. It was an apology, an admission, and a promise all at once. He would not make her weak, but he acknowledged her strength. He saw the fire in her, and instead of extinguishing it, he had, in his own ruthless way, honored it. He had burned the paper, but with this single, breathtaking gesture, he had proven he could not, and would not, burn the love that lived inside her. And in that moment, the dragon's heart, for the first time, showed a fragile, human crack. The drawing changed everything. It sat on her bedside table, a testament not to his power, but to his perception. He had seen the depth of her pain and, instead of dismissing it, he had answered it with an act of breathtaking, complicated grace. The ice around Veronica's heart didn't melt, but it developed a fissure, allowing a single, warm ray of understanding to seep through. Their interactions shifted. The air between them was no longer just charged with fear and authority, but with a new, tense curiosity. He began to eat dinner with her every night. The conversations were stilted at first, simple questions about the food, the weather. But he watched her, truly listened, as if deciphering a complex code. One evening, as a soft rain pattered against the panoramic windows, she found the courage to ask, "Why this? Why the dinners? The conversation? You have what you wanted. I'm safe. I'm here." Junho swirled the red wine in his glass, his gaze distant. "A fortress is only as strong as the will of those inside it. I do not want a prisoner, Veronica. I want an ally." He looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the city lights blurred by rain. "Tell me about your cafe." The question shocked her. It was the dream she'd buried, the fragile thing she thought he would crush. It, it was silly. Just a small place. Good coffee. The walls would be covered in local art. What kind of art? He pressed, his voice low. The kind that makes you feel something, she said, her voice gaining strength. Not the cold, perfect things you have here. Messy, emotional art. Art that tells a story. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I know many stories. Few of them are suitable for a cafe wall. It was the first time he had ever acknowledged the darkness of his world to her directly. It was an offering, a piece of his truth in exchange for a piece of her dream. Days turned into a routine. He would leave for his business, and she would explore the house, finding a music room with a grand piano, a library with books that actually looked read. She was no longer a ghost. She was becoming a resident. One afternoon, she ventured into his private study, a room she had been warned was off limits. It was dominated by a massive desk of polished obsidian, and there, in a simple, elegant frame, was a photograph of a smiling, elegant woman with kind eyes, a younger version of the mother from her burned picture. He had not just drawn it from memory, he had sourced the original image. He had gone into the heart of her past and retrieved a piece of it for her. Her breath caught. This was more than an apology. This was a vow. That night, he came home later than usual. She heard his footsteps, heavier than normal, and saw the tension in his shoulders as he passed her open door. On impulse, she went to the kitchen and made a simple cup of tea, the way her mother had taught her, hibiscus and a touch of honey. She found him standing in the dark of his study, staring out at the rain-slicked city, his back to her. She placed the steaming mug on his desk. It's not wine, she said softly, but it's warm. He didn't turn, but his posture softened almost imperceptibly. He was silent for a long moment, the only sound the gentle click of the cooling mug. They tried to kill me today, he said, his voice so quiet she almost didn't hear it. A man I trusted. The confession hung in the dark room, stark and terrifying. He was letting her see the cracks in his armor, the immense pressure he lived under. He was showing her his world wasn't just power and opulence. It was betrayal and death. He finally turned to face her, and in his eyes, she didn't see a ruthless mafia boss. She saw a man, profoundly alone, who had just trusted her with the most dangerous truth of all, his vulnerability. The confession hung between them, a live wire in the dark study. They tried to kill me today. The words painted a brutal reality over the gilded walls. Veronica didn't speak. She simply stepped forward, closed the distance, and picked up the mug of tea, pressing it gently into his hands. Her fingers brushed against his, and this time, the electric jolt was one of shared understanding, not fear. He took the mug, his gaze locked with hers. He took a sip, and something in his rigid posture finally broke. A slow, weary exhale. It's good, he murmured, the compliment sounding foreign on his tongue. That single, shared moment in the dark became a new beginning. The next morning, Junho did not leave for work. Instead, he found her reading in the library. Get dressed. We're going out. The command sent a thrill of both terror and excitement through her. Out. A fortress can also become a tomb, he said, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. You spoke of art that tells a story. I will show you one. An hour later, she was sitting in the passenger seat of a sleek, understated car, Junho himself driving. Kim, the bodyguard, followed in a separate vehicle at a discreet distance. They weren't going to a gallery or a museum. He drove her to Ixieandong, a maze of narrow, winding alleys filled with traditional hanok houses, quirky boutiques, and tiny, hidden cafes. It was the complete opposite of his world of steel and glass. It was vibrant, messy, and alive. He walked beside her, a silent, powerful shadow. People instinctively moved out of his way, sensing the danger that clung to him, but he seemed different. His guard was slightly down. He bought her a hottiop from a street vendor, watching her intently as she took the first sweet, syrupy bite. It's delicious, she laughed, a real, unburdened sound that surprised even her. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. Good. They wandered into a small, sun-drenched art studio tucked away in a corner. The walls were covered in vibrant, slightly chaotic paintings, exactly the kind she had described. The artist, an elderly woman with paint-smudged fingers, smiled at them. "See anything you like?" the woman asked. Veronica's eyes were drawn to a small canvas. It depicted a single, resilient flower growing from a crack in a dark, imposing wall. It was her story. Before she could speak, Junho stepped forward. "We'll take it," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He handed the woman a stack of bills far exceeding the price tag. As they left, the painting carefully wrapped, he turned to her. "Your cafe," he said. "It would be in a place like this." Her heart swelled, beating a frantic, hopeful rhythm. "Yes, exactly like this." He nodded, as if filing the information away. The sun warmed her skin. The sounds of the lively neighborhood filled her ears, and for the first time since he dragged her into that penthouse room, she didn't feel like a prisoner or a possession. She felt seen. She felt cherished. As they turned a corner, the illusion of a normal day shattered. Kim was suddenly at Junho's side, his voice a low, urgent whisper. "Bus. We have a tail. 2 cars. It's the Jade Tigers. They must have tracked us." Junho's entire demeanor transformed in an instant. The softness vanished, replaced by a lethal, focused calm. He pulled Veronica close, his arm a steel band around her shoulders, shielding her body with his own. "Time to go," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. But as he guided her swiftly back toward the car, his grip was not one of confinement, but of fierce, desperate protection. The taste of freedom had been sweet, but it had led the wolves right to their door. And as he pushed her into the safety of the car, his eyes met hers, blazing with a terrifying promise. He would tear the entire city apart before he let them touch her again. The drive back to the fortress was a silent, high-speed nightmare. Junho drove with a terrifying, controlled fury, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Veronica watched the city blow past, the lingering taste of Hotiok and freedom now ash in her mouth. The Jade Tigers had not forgotten. Her old life was reaching its claws into her new one, threatening to shred it. Inside the safe house, the atmosphere was electric. Junho was a different man. The brief glimpse of the man who appreciated art and street food was gone, replaced by the undisputed king of the underworld. He barked orders into his phone, his voice a whipcrack of authority. Men in dark suits moved with purpose, their faces grim. Veronica stood in the center of the living room, feeling the storm gather around her. "This is my fault," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If I hadn't gone out." Junho ended his call and crossed the room in 3 long strides. He didn't touch her, but his presence was an anchor in the chaos. "No," he said, his voice low and absolute. "This was always coming. They challenged what is mine. That is a death sentence." The word mine no longer felt like a chain. It felt like a shield. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek, a shocking contrast to the violence in his eyes. "They saw me with you. They saw me soft. They think it is a weakness. They are wrong." His gaze burned into hers, fierce and possessive. "You are not my weakness, Veronica. You are the reason I have something left to fight for. You are my strength." The confession was more potent than any kiss, more binding than any contract. He was not protecting a possession. He was defending the woman who had become his heart. "I have to end this. Tonight," he stated, his decision final. "You will stay here with Kim. You will be safe." Panic seized her. "Junho, no. Don't go." The plea was ripped from her soul. She couldn't bear the thought of him walking into violence, of losing him now that she had finally found him. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers, their breaths mingling. "I will come back to you," he vowed, his voice a raw whisper. "I have to, because a world without your light is a world not worth ruling." He pulled away, his expression hardening into an unbreakable mask of resolve. He gave a sharp nod to Kim, then turned and walked out the door without a backward glance, his men falling in behind him. The heavy door clicked shut, and the silence he left behind was deafening. Veronica wrapped her arms around herself, the small, wrapped painting of the flower feeling heavy in her hand. Kim stood stoically by the door, a silent sentinel. Hours ticked by. Each minute felt like an eternity. She jumped at every sound, her heart pounding a frantic, terrified rhythm. She pictured him in dark alleys, facing down guns and knives. She remembered the weariness in his eyes, the weight of his world, and she knew, with a certainty that shook her to her core, that she loved him. She loved the dragon, with all his darkness and his unexpected, devastating light. Suddenly, her phone, a new, secure one he had given her, vibrated on the table. A single, location-tagged message from an unknown number lit up the screen. It was a photo of the charred remains of her old apartment building, followed by 3 words that turned her blood to ice. "We have him." The message wasn't from Junho. It was from the Jade Tigers. They hadn't walked into his trap. They had laid one of their own, and the dragon, who had gone out to wage a war for her, was now their prisoner. The world stopped. The message on the phone screen burned into Veronica's vision. "We have him." The fortress, once a cage, now felt like a hollowed-out tomb. Junho was gone. Captured. Because of her. A cold, clear certainty washed over her, freezing the panic in its tracks. The rabbit was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned from the dragon himself. Kim was already on his phone, his voice a low, urgent snarl, mobilizing every available soldier. "We'll find him, miss. We'll get him back." "No," Veronica said, her voice unnervingly calm. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to let the professionals handle it. But this was not a professional matter. This was the man she loved. They don't want a war. If they did, he'd already be dead. They sent that message to me. She picked up her phone, her fingers steady. She typed a reply to the unknown number, her heart a single, throbbing drumbeat of purpose. "You have something of mine. I'm coming to get it. Hurt him, and you lose your only leverage. Send the address." The reply was instantaneous. An address for a derelict warehouse in the old shipyards. "Miss Veronica, you cannot," Kim started, horror on his face. "He is my heart, Kim," she said, cutting him off, her eyes blazing with a fire he had only ever seen in his boss. "And I am not asking for your permission. You can either help me or get out of my way." The drive was a silent, grim procession. Kim and a small, elite team followed her instructions, surrounding the warehouse while she, clad in dark, practical clothing Kim had provided, walked alone through the main entrance. The warehouse was cavernous and reeked of rust and salt water. And there, in the center, under a single, hanging light, was Junho. He was on his knees, his suit jacket gone, his white shirt stained with blood. But his head was held high, his eyes burning with a feral, proud fury. When he saw her, that fury transformed into pure, unadulterated terror. "Veronica, no, get out." The leader of the Jade Tigers, a smirking brute named Day, stepped forward. "The little rabbit has teeth. How touching." "Let him go," Veronica commanded, her voice echoing in the vast space. "You wanted to draw me out. Here I am. Your fight is with me." Day laughed. "It was. But now." He raised a gun, aiming it at Junho's head. "I think I'll take both." Time seemed to slow. Veronica didn't look at the gun. She looked at Junho. She poured every ounce of her love, her strength, her gratitude into that one look. "You are my strength," he had said. Now it was her turn. A single, sharp crack rang out, but it wasn't from Day's gun. From the shadows high in the rafters, Kim's sniper rifle spoke. Day crumpled, a dark bloom spreading on his chest. Chaos erupted as Junho's men swarmed the warehouse. Veronica didn't flinch. She ran, stumbling through the sudden gunfire, falling to her knees in front of Junho. Her hands, trembling now, frantically worked at the ropes binding his wrists. "You came back," he rasped, his voice raw with emotion, his gaze drinking her in as if she were water in a desert. "You told me to stay," she said, her tears finally falling, mingling with the blood on his shirt. "But my heart wasn't there. It was with you." The ropes fell away. His freed hands came up, cupping her face, his thumbs wiping her tears. "The world The violence, the danger, it all faded into a distant hum. There was only his breath on her face, the frantic, matching beat of their hearts, and the blazing truth in his eyes. "I love you," he whispered, the words of vow, a confession, a final surrender. "I know," she breathed, her lips curving into a tear-streaked smile. "I love you, too." And there, in the heart of the darkness, surrounded by the echoes of a finished war, he kissed her. It was not a kiss of possession, or of shock, or of comfort. It was a kiss of equals, a kiss of promise, a kiss that was the first beat of the rest of their lives. Their love had been forged in fear, tested by fire, and sealed in blood. And as his lips met hers, the thrilling, heart-throbbing beat of their two hearts finally became one forever. Did this story make your heart race? For more breathtaking, heart-throbbing tales of love and danger, subscribe, like, and share. Your next obsession is waiting.